What's good, guys? Welcome back to Small Talk on Head-to-Head Fantasy Basketball. Right, and today you'll be joined by two hosts today. My name is Alan.
My name is Anson, and today we're going to show you guys how to set up and play ESPN head-to-head fantasy. I think this is the best, easiest mode to play on, especially if you're a beginner.
Yeah, I agree. So first thing you want to do is when you go to ESPN.com, right, you should hover probably like fantasy, and there'll be sign up men's basketball. So you press onto that, it'll bring you to this page right here, right? And once you're on this page right here, you want to play with your friends, you create a league. And then how many of your friends are wanting to play, including yourself. So you need an even number, right? And usually I think somewhere around from 8 to maybe 12 is a good number, but you could play with 6 or maybe 4. But I do recommend playing with a little bit more people, so maybe 8 to 12 will be good for a league, right? So let's just say you have 7 of your friends that want to play, and you guys want to make your league, be like, I don't know, NBA, 2K24. All right, 24 fantasy, right? That'll be your name, right? For your league name. So you and your friends are gonna play, and you guys are gonna select the head-to-head points, right? So, Anson, do you want to explain the difference between these categories?
Yeah, so head-to-head points I would recommend because it's the simplest way to play. Basically, with head-to-head points, every basket is a certain amount of fantasy points. Head-to-head means that each week you're facing off one opponent. Compare that to season points. On the very bottom, season points work the same way in terms of calculation, but how you win is you would have to have the most amount of points at the end of the season. I think head to head is more exciting because every week you would have to accumulate all those points of your players that you sub in. Every week you would have to beat one opponent, and eventually, by the end of the season, if your record is good, you'll make the playoffs and you'll compete from there to win the championship. When it comes to categories, there's different type of categories, but it's basically like categories like your team has to perform the best in a specific category, like rebounding, points, field goal, 3 point. The rankings are very, very different. So our channel specializes on head-to-head points. If you guys watch our videos, you should definitely only take advice in your head-to-head points league and not category.
Yeah, yeah, just like Anton said, right? The head-to-head points is facing off head-to-head. You're going against one other opponent compared to season points where, you know, if you forget a sub in 1 week or you're busy 1 week, you might be kind of screwed for the season, because you're missing probably over like 3,000 points, right? But for head-to-head, it resets every week, right? So we'll be playing this league, and this is what our channel is mainly about. And like I said, 8 to 12 people would be great. So let's say you had 7 other friends, you create your league, and this is where you would invite your friends, copy the invite link or invite via the email, like, hey guys, I create the league, let's join up, right? And it should take you to this draft here, right? So fantasy basketball 2024, right? And then you invite your friends and say, hey, we're gonna schedule a draft, right? Schedule a draft when everybody's in. And then a good way to decide the draft type is a snake draft, in my opinion. I feel like that's the most simple and the most fair way, right? Because if you guys don't know what the snake draft is, right, it's basically if you have the first pick, it's like a snake, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then it goes back to the eighth player again. So the eighth player gets a back-to-back pick, and then it goes back to 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right. And I think that's fair because if you grab the first best player, it makes sense for the eighth the eighth drafter to get, the eighth best player and the ninth best player, since he can't get a top five or top eight, basically a top 8 player or top 7 player, right? But he's able to get an 8 and 9 player. So the first player will get number 1 and probably number like 16, right? So that's kind of how it kind of makes it more fair, in my opinion. And it's a lot easier to do, right? And the draft settings, you can set your date. Right. So the season does start in the 24th. Correct me if I'm wrong, Anson. 24th?
Yes.
Yes, 24th. So, usually you want to draft somewhere around this date. You don't really want to draft after. I mean, you could if you want, but try to draft. I don't want to say draft too early either. Right. We're draft when are we drafting? We're drafting on the 24th, right? Or the 23rd.
I believe
Or
us,
the
we're
or the
gonna
Sunday.
draft on the 14th, maybe,
Oh, the
or
14th?
or the 20th. Anywhere from there. I'd usually recommend Do you
Yeah,
guys
I
draft
think
on
this
the
is solid
back
right here.
end of the preseason? Because preseason is 2 weeks, so maybe like 1 week before the actual season start would be a good day.
Yeah, so I think like yeah, 14 to the 20th would be a good, try to schedule something where everyone has to be there, by the way. Like you have to be on your mobile device or on your computer to be drafting. You can't say, "Okay, you draft first and then let me know when I'm drafting." Like no, it doesn't work that way. Right? So everyone has a limited amount of time to draft and everyone needs to be there or else it's going to be auto picked. All right? So let's say you're like, "Hey, you know what? Friday, October 20th is a good day for all of us." Okay, cool. Say your time, right? Let's say you guys are cool with maybe somewhere after dinner, right? Let's say 7 p.m., 7:30 p.m., whatever, right? Let's say 7:30. And then you can choose how long you have time to pick. So we have 90 seconds per pick or 30 seconds if you really want to make it quicker. But ideally, I feel like 90 seconds is a very, very solid amount of time already. And then the draft order, you can set it yourself, right? Or you can just have it randomized for everyone there, right? Usually, for our league, or like when I say our league is Anson in our league, we go by lottery, right? We don't have to get too much into it, but basically whoever won last year have the least amount of odds, just like the NBA. If you lost, you have a higher odds to get a better pick. Basically, that's kind of how it works for our draft too. But let's say you guys just want to do randomize. Okay, randomize. Okay, 1 hour before you guys will get your pick positions, and you'll be like, okay, where am I going to draft that? Right? If you want, is there a way to change this, Anson, to make it can we change it to 1 hour prior, or is it only 1 hour?
It's usually 1 hour prior. Yeah, you can.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. So if you guys just do randomize, okay, you guys have randomized for 1 hour before, you guys will get your draft position. So if you guys get, the third pick, then you guys will have to count your snake order, and then you guys will be like, okay, there's, gonna be so and so more people after me that will when it finally comes back to my pick, and then I'll have my second player, right? So, you guys kind of draft like that. So we'll save the changes for this for now. Let's say this is your league, right? And then we'll go into scoring, right? Where Anson will kind of go over this briefly on what the scoring is.
So, like I said, how it works is every time your player does something good, you get positive points. It'll add up every week, it'll add up and it resets every week, each matchup. So whenever your player scores a 2 pointer, for example, you'll get 2 points for the field goal made. Because they attempted a shot, it'll be -1. And they'll also get points if you go down to points itself, you'll get 2 points for a 2 point basket. So a layup, a mid range jump shot. So you get 2 points for the points, 2 points for field goal made, -1 for the attempt. So if you're watching the game live, every time your player hits a 2 pointer, you'll basically get 3 fantasy points for that 2 pointer. And then for a 3 pointer, you'll get two you'll get extra 1 point for the points 3 point made. You'll also get -1 for the attempt, +2 for the field goal, and you'll get 3 points for the points. So if you add it all up, every time you see your player hit a 3 pointer, just know that will be 5 fantasy points when you add it all up based off of the default settings. You could always edit the settings, but yeah, if you're watching the game live, you don't want to open your phone and check how much. Every time your player hits a three, it's 5. Every time it's a layup or a 2 pointer, it'll be 3 points, 3 fantasy points, and then there's also you can also add up the field goal made, field goal attempt. It'll be just be +1, -1, and you also get a point if they make the free throw. If they miss the free throw, then obviously you won't get any points for it. But yeah, and then everything else is pretty simple. Rebounds are 1 point for every rebound, 2 points for every assist. It's good to remember that recently, if you're just getting back into fantasy, I know rebounds used to be 2. Just know it is 1 now. So centers and power forwards kind of got nerfed, and then blocks and steals also got a buff. They weren't 4 before, but they're 4 now. And then turnovers are -2.
Yeah, yeah. So make sure you guys have all these set up well, right? If you guys, having discrepancies like, hey, I don't think free throws should be -1 or +1, you guys can kind of sort out in your own league, but usually I feel like this scoring is really pretty fair, right? The only adjust that we do in our league is the free throws attempt, right? We make this instead of -1. We do minus 0.5 instead. But if you guys don't want to do that, right, that's fine too. Just keep it -1. You just want to keep it simple, right? You can just keep it simple, right? And yeah, these are the general rule. Like, hey, this is all the scoring types. So just like Anson said already, this is how it will keep score for all your players, and it'll add every player up in your team, right? And we're gonna go on to the rosters, right? And right now, as a rosters, there's really no limit on who to pick, but you do have to remember, right? You can't just grab all point guards because there is let me see. Can we see our roster, or is it just this where
Yes.
we can't really
Click edit roster. Click
add a
edit
roster?
roster. Yeah.
Oh,
And it shows you like how many starters are the point guard and centers and how many utility positions are available. So
oh, right here. That's what I was trying to look at. Roster preview.
and you
Okay, so
can
yeah,
change it.
oh yeah, you could change it, right?
You can change it so like okay, you could put 2 point guards, two shooting, but obviously like that's kind of weird.
Yeah. So we'll keep it normal for now, right? So we obviously your roster preview is what your everyone's roster is gonna look like, right? You're gonna have one point guard, one shooting guard, one small forward, one power forward, one center, and one extra guard, and also an extra forward. Three utilities, right? Utility. I don't want you guys to be like, oh, what is util, right? Like, util basically means you can put any position, any player into these three, right? So at one time you can only have 10 players. So these are your 10 that you're going to be playing, right? You're going to have three people on the bench that so for example, let's say you had 11 players playing that day. You can only put in 10. So you had to kind of decide like who do I kind of fit in on my who do I want to play for me for that day. Even though I have 11, that means one person will be running the bench, right? And so you kind of want to be aware of that, right? And then there's this IR slot, which is injured, right? Injury reserve. So let's say your player gets injured, okay, that's bad, tough for you. But what you can do is you could put them in the IR and just be like, okay, this is my player in the IR, right? And then you can grab another player from the free agent, right? We'll talk more about that another video. But as of right now, we're just kind of showing you guys how the head-to-head points league works. So everyone's gonna have the exact same roster preview, right? And then you guys will decide like who do you want to be playing for you. A majority of the time, it won't be overstacked. Like when I say overstack, it means like you'll have more than 10 people playing at one time, unless you just draft like four players from one team, right? Let's say you have, I don't know, Levine, DeRozan, Vucevic, um, Kobe White, Lonzo. Like you just have five Bulls players, and then you have like five more other players from like different teams are playing today too. Then that'll be the only reason why you have over like you will go over the amount of players that can play, right? But yeah, it should be very, very
And
straightforward. You guys can kind of make your adjustments here, right? The other adjustment that we have in our league is that we make our injury reserve what, 3?
yeah, you could choose yourself, but ever since COVID was happening, players were getting sick.
Yeah.
And with, the type of low management in today's league, I think 3 is pretty good. Back then, no one really thought about increasing the injury reserve just because back then everyone played. But yeah, popular option is to increase the injury reserve.
Yeah. Just because sometimes when there's COVID, it's like they're not really injured, but like we have to use one of our slots. And there's just one season, when COVID was really, really bad. Like almost everyone that was playing in our league had like 5 or 6 players that was just COVID that was out. And then at that point, it was not even fantasy players winning or losing. It was just who can stay healthy and who's gonna play for you. Right. So I think adding the IR slot just in case, if because COVID is gone, but there's could be other, like Anson said, low management or something else happen. Like, they might, have a little sprain. They might just sit out for today, sit out back to back. Then you want to have the extra IR slot just so you can have some players coming in that you can kind of stream in. Right. But we'll save it at 3 for now. Right. And then is there anything else you kind of want to talk about, Anson?
Yeah, so if you go up to standings,
Standings right here.
yeah, all right, we're gonna have okay. So the top guys, if you have one of the best records and you're eligible for playoffs, this really depends on how many players are in your league. If you're, for example, in a 6 man or 8 man, I think only the top 4 makes the playoffs. So you can click the projected playoff bracket. And if you do make the playoffs, depending on your league size, you will have a certain amount of rounds. If you're in a smaller league, like for example, an 8 man league, then your playoffs will be a 2 week matchup, and it'll be single elimination. You'll just keep playing each other until you get to the finals, and whoever wins the finals will eventually win the league championship.
Yeah, yeah. I can show you guys an example of this Los Angeles team that I'm a part of. Do the standings. I'll kind of show you something like this. Obviously, the games hasn't started yet, right? But like Anson said, right, it'll have like the win loss, the tie record. If you somehow tie, it's very rare to tie, but if you do tie, it'll put a tie record there, right? And then usually if your team, the more your team wins, the higher your playoff percentage goes up, right? Obviously, everyone's around 40 right now because the league hasn't started yet. Um, but yeah, once you start winning and people start losing, you'll start seeing the playoff percentage go up or down. I wouldn't weigh too heavily on that until it's like closer to the end. In the beginning, anything can happen. Like you can have a good start, 4-0, 4-0 start, but the fantasy season goes on, a lot longer than 4 weeks. So
We've seen players with 5% odds end up making the playoffs. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Unless it says zero, then that's you can't make it. Unless it
If
says zero.
if it
Unless
says zero, ESPN has calculated that even though if you win every single game,
yeah.
you wouldn't still be able to qualify for the playoffs. Just like real life when the OKC Thunder or when the Houston Rockets, they'll get eliminated from the playoffs somewhere in mid-March or April because even if they win the rest of their season, it wouldn't have enough games to make the eighth seed, for example.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll go back to this one right here. Oops, this one right here, right? But yeah, so we have the scheduled already for Friday, October 20th at 7:30. Make sure you remind your friends, like, hey, we have a draft there. If you're not on, it'll be auto drafting for you. And you don't want the league to auto draft just because, I mean, we'll have another video explaining why the auto draft is not that good. Like, because they're auto drafting from ESPN rankings. And we're about to make a video about ESPN rankings, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, 27 days until our draft, right? This does not mean the season's gonna start on the 20th. It just means until the draft day. Right? I think the season starts in 31 days, to be exact. But yeah, you can also add a second manager, but you don't really need to do that because you're managing your own team. These are going to be your slots where you put your players when you draft them, right? Oops, get that out of the way. So point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center, guard forward, 3 util, 3 bench, 3 IR. So this is kind of how it would work, right? When you guys have this. And when you do have players, you can, like, let's say something happens to them, you didn't watch the game, you will have a news here. So let's say, Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard, he decides to sit out, and you want to check your news before the game start, right? Anson will kind of go get into it, but you kind of want to check your news just before the games start, so you can kind of see, who's playing for you, who's not. You want to sub in your players that are playing, sub out the players that aren't playing, or move them to the IR if they're not playing. All right, go ahead, Anson.
Yeah, so to sub in your players, you got to make sure you do it before the lock of every single game. So personally, we are from the West Coast. Our games on most days, the earliest games will start at 4 p.m. So even though you have a player, for example, I have LeBron, a lot of Laker games start at 7. You want to make sure that you sub LeBron in at before 4 o'clock, even though his game specifically starts at 7. It's just the first game of the day. That's when the lineup locks. You also want to make sure on the weekends it's different. So just keep that in mind. I don't want you to be surprised because a lot of the games on the weekends they'll start at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Sometimes they'll start at 9 a.m. Western time, which is 6 a.m. Eastern time. So make sure you check. You check when your players' games start. You can check on ESPN, check on NBA.com, but just make sure you're aware of the first game of the day because that's when it's gonna lock all the positions. So if one of your players are injured or you have to cycle a player, just so you know, like the deadline to either pick someone up or just take a risk. If someone is questionable, just take a risk and hope for the best.
Yeah, yeah. So all those will come. Like, obviously, we're talking about it now. It's kind of very like, oh, I don't really see anything. Yeah, but once you guys start drafting, you'll start understanding what we're talking about. Like, oh, it'll tell you, LeBron James starts at 7 p.m. And then if he's still on your bench, you kind of want to move him up into the starting lineup because these are your starters, right? You want to put them in for you to play. If you put them on a bench, then it doesn't matter to score 1,000 fantasy points or 100 fantasy points. It's not going to go towards your total because they're on the bench, right? You have to remember to put them in the starting lineup, or else they're not going to their score is not going to keep track for you guys, right? So there's been a lot of times where me personally, like sometimes I forget or I'm out and I'll check my phone like, oh dang, it's 4:30. Like I pull up my phone, check out fantasy. I left, two players on the bench. I'm like, dang, that's like probably like 50, 60 fantasy points that I missed out on just because I didn't put them in to my starting lineup. And that could impact, something happening down the week. Let's say I lose by 30, 40 fantasy points. Technically, I would have won if I put them in, but I didn't because I forgot, right? So you guys gotta have to kind of be aware of this. It's supposed to be fun. I don't want you guys to take it too seriously, right? It's supposed to be something fun for you and your friends to play around with, like just mess around with, draft players that you like watching. So let's say you're out eating, you're like, oh, there's a game on. I have a player in this game. It makes it a little bit more exciting. You're like, oh yeah, I have that player. Let me check how he's doing, if he's doing well and whatnot. But yeah, it's supposed to be fun. So I think that's gonna wrap up the video about just going over, the head-to-head fantasy ESPN points league. Right? Is there anything else you have to add for this, Anson?
Yeah, make sure you guys follow and subscribe. We're gonna be giving out tips so you guys know how to dominate your league. So make sure you guys follow and comment. If you have any other questions that maybe we didn't cover something you're curious about, let us know. And we'll try to either get back to you or we might make a whole separate video just to answer your question.
Yep, yep, yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed, right? And we do have some of our rankings, our personal rankings, on our channel already. So if you're like, yo, I don't know who to draft, who's good, haven't watched the NBA in a long time, don't worry, we got you. Go on our channel, you'll see what the little tier list we made, right? And you can kind of start understanding like, oh, who's good in fantasy and why, right? So if you guys haven't already, go check out our other videos, right? But that's it. Hope you guys have a great day. Hope you guys have a great fantasy season, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.
Peace.